So I'm guessing right now you're looking at this algae mess down here. Don't worry, look over here. We'll come to that next.
But before we get into the aquascaping, I think we should find out where it all began. And this is a lovely coastline between Lennox Head and Byron Bay. If you're not familiar with that area, it's the little coastal town to the north coast of New South Wales. And this is Calopa filiformis. It's a subtropical seaweed, only found in waters between 16 degrees Celsius and 24 degrees Celsius. So it's on the east coast of New South Wales. It's also found on the southern tip of South America and off South Africa. And I was really taken aback by the way that Calopa species actually moves in the swell. I decided to team it up with this amazing rock, which I collected myself from Sawtell Beach, which is a local beach, and to provide a real, almost a freshwater aesthetic. The rock itself is actually a fairly dense rock. It's nothing like the porosity that you'd find in limestone or aragonite that we used to in marine reef keeping. So I wasn't sure how the bottom of the tank would take with weight. I decided to put some offcuts of this egg plate down first to try and distribute the weight a bit more, but I don't think it's done. I don't think it's done. The bottom of the tank is 12 mil thick glass and it's absolutely fine. You can see here I'm going through the aquascaping process. I used a fair bit of expanding foam to support the rock work and to help to solidify the rocks together, which actually worked out quite nicely. The main aim was to build a higher area in the back right-hand side of the tank and bring it down to a more island style in the middle. Here I'm actually priming the expanding foam, the cured expanding foam with a liquid cyanoacrylate super glue. This is where I'm going to adhere to macroalgae, and I'm also priming the rock areas that I want to glue macroalgae onto also. This is a little trick that I used when I'm gluing corals onto rocks in a reef tank. I find it that the items adhere a lot better to a previously primed hardscape. So I use a liquid first, and then I use a gel super glue onto the rhizomes of, in this case, Calopa. But this technique will work just as easily in freshwater style aquarium if you're gluing Java fern, Microstorum, or you're doing Nubius or Bulbitis ferns onto the wood rock hardscape. Just find once you prime the hardscape first, you get a much better adherence with the actual plants or in this case algae. You can also see I've already glued the Ketamorpha style algae onto the rock state also.
So this tank here, the original tank, is a 1.4 metres long by 90 centimetres or 3 foot front to back and 2 foot high tank. It's about 600 litres. Really wanted to collect some macroalgae, and I was particularly taken by this Calopa species here, which is Calopa filiformis. And I wanted to try and set up an aquascape that was, it's a marine aquascape, and it's got all marine elements, but it's also got a slight freshwater aesthetic to it. And the reason being for that is I wanted to be true to the marine habitat, but also have something that could appeal to a freshwater keeper. I've got a combination of beach gravel, beach sand, and shell grit. The rocks I went and collected myself from sunny Sawtell, and the macroalgae species, I'm not aware of all of them. Dictyota is actually the brown macroalgae there. I've got a young brown kelp in the back, which is Ectonia, and this is Calopa filiformis. There's a macroalgae in here, which a lot of people might think is Ketamorpha. It's not Ketamorpha. I don't actually know what it is, but it's the dark green, sort of mat-like algae which I've actually got growing on the rock work, and it's actually quite a nice algae. The fish I've got in this tank at the moment is a group of 9 old wives. I love that name. I might get in trouble here, I won't say that, but I love that name. Old wives are a fish which are a really common temperate water fish, found from the subtropical waters of lower Queensland, Brisbane, Gold Coast area, all the way down the east coast of Australia and around the southern waters of Australia, and they live in macroalgae areas, especially around kelp. And one of their common names, other than old wife, is actually the double scalar. And you can see the reason why they're actually called the double scalar, because their patterning is almost identical to a freshwater pterophyllum scalar angelfish. The double because they've got those two dorsal spine, dorsal fins. And on the topic of dorsal fins and spines, they actually are venomous. So far, these guys have actually, they're settled in quite well. One of the things I've found is that they are eating frozen bloodworms and mysis shrimp quite readily. They'll eat live grass shrimp, and also these little tiny baby juvenile mullet or whitebait. They are not taking pellets at the moment, which I'm ideally hoping I can transfer them across to some pellets, because I do use a lot of natural frozen foods and meaty foods, and also I do at times collect some live foods. But if you've got that backup of pellets, it just makes everything so much easier. There's also a pair of coral banded shrimp in here, which I collected up at Sandy Beach, and a variety of hermit crabs. The snail which I love to use in my marine tanks is actually the cowrie snail, the gold ring cowrie. I find it does quite a good job of actually cleaning the surface algae. But being quite a new tank, you know, I still experience my diatom blooms on the glass, and it's just something to work through, as any fish keeper well knows. I do fertilise this tank, and I'm using this. It's a freshwater planted fertiliser that contains iron in a EDDHA form, which is a chelated iron which is stable in alkaline conditions. So most iron chelates like EDHA do not allow the iron to be readily available at alkaline pHs. They only work at pHs that are from neutral down to acidic. So when I found this one here, which is again a freshwater planted tank fertiliser, but has the iron in that EDDHA form, I thought fantastic, I'll use that and see how it goes. The brown macroalgae I've had a little bit more trouble with so far. I find sometimes that the fronds start to get holes and disintegrate a little bit. That might be a micronutrient. It might also be an adjustment process. I found that with the macroalgae, sometimes they have two types of fronds. They have some sort of small juvenile fronds or leaves, but then they'll put out the larger forms. So there might be a period of adjustment.
Righto, so I'll come out, well, I'll start again. When you see this is about a week after I took the video for my tour. And I've come out this morning just to have a cup of tea and some breakfast like I usually do. Sit out here and fertilise the tanks and do some feeding and watch the fish, and I found this. Last night actually I was working in the shed here, and I did notice the lights were off, but there was a real strange kind of greyish olive coloration on some of the Caulerpa filiformis in this tank, and the Caulerpa filiformis is that strap grassy looking one. And I thought, oh no, here we go. It's going to go dump all its spores out. So I still don't know what the result of all that reproduction effort is. I can see some ghost white Caulerpa in there, and there's still also some green Caulerpa. It's quite frustrating. I have tried this Caulerpa filiformis once previously, and it dumped out its spores within about a week. In this case here, I've had this tank going for, I don't know, a month or maybe even 2 months now, and it's been growing really well and extending its rhizomes along the rocks. I've been fertilising, it's looking dark green and nice, and it's regrowing from a bit of pruning, and I thought, perfect, it's going to be fine. But anyway, the fish seem okay. All I've really decided to do is put some mechanical filtration into the overflow. Hopefully that'll help clear the tank up, and then I can get a real idea of what the damage is. I wonder maybe actually if it's a natural occurrence by Caulerpa to clear the substrate or the rock work of old foliage and allow fresh foliage to grow from the rhizomes. I'm wondering, this is just a bit of a brain thought here. What do they call it? A brain experiment, a thought experiment. That's what it is. Because it's growing so nicely, there was no stresses. One thing I did notice on the actual fronds was some tiny little star-like clusters, about maybe 3 or 4 per leaf or per frond. So when we think about spores, we think about lots and lots and lots of dots. This is not that. This was actually star-shaped sort of clusters that were growing off the surface. It was only like 3 or 4 per frond, almost like a little baby plantlet. I'm in horticulture, and some plants, this is an algae, but some plants actually have plantlets, which will often grow from a flowering stem, and they fall off and start new plants. So it was just like that. So I expect to come out this morning and find everything okay, but lots of little plants might have been floating around the tank. But instead I found this. So anyway, we'll wait and see what happens.
I've actually put some frosted film on the back wall of the tank. It's just that sort of sign writers adhesive they use to create that privacy on windows. And the idea with that is it creates that nice sort of aqua kind of bright feel to the background. But what I could also do is put a LED strip, maybe like a blue LED strip, at the bottom along the back, shining up, and create that other kind of aesthetic that you sometimes see in freshwater planted tanks. So I might mess around with that a little bit too. Filtration is basically, I've hard plumbed a pump to the overflow box. So it actually acts almost like a closed loop, or the overflow box is the sump itself. And in that overflow box, I've got some activated carbon, because I do find that macroalgae release a bit of I guess you might say tannins or colour tint to the water, so I want to just try and remove that. And I've got just some filter floss in there, and some biomedia which I had lying around. To be honest with you, I don't think I'd need that. My fish stocking is only 9 fish plus these little live food at the moment, a couple of shrimp, and with the growth of the macroalgae, especially the caulerpa, I feel like that would suck out the majority of the nutrients, particularly any ammonia. And in actual fact, the fertiliser I've got does have a little bit of nitrate and phosphate in it. So Australian fish keepers, it doesn't matter if you're into marine fish like me, if you're into turtles, if you're into freshwater fish, goldfish, native fish. You need to feed them, and I recommend we get behind a good Australian company. So this is my food of choice at the moment, which is frenzyfishfeeds.com.au, that's the website. Frenzy Fish Feeds, our Tasmanian-based fish food company. They've been very, very good to provide me with a discount code, a 10% discount code to pass on to you guys when you make your next order. If you type in the code Aussie Aquarist in capitals in the discount code box, you'll get your 10% off your order. You'll help me out, you'll save some money, and we're getting behind a good Australian company. So see what you think. frenzyfishfeeds.com.au. Right, yeah, it's time for the eyesore of the room. Believe it or not, this aquarium is aquascaped. I spent a fair bit of time aquascaping this tank. Is aquascaped. I spent a fair bit of time aquascaping this tank, but I have just let it be. I have been fertilising it once a day because it is set up for macroalgae, and there is one fish in here, which is my green moray, and I've been letting it lie. I've been letting it be. I've been fertilising it, and I've been letting it go. Probably this weekend I might actually scrape this algae off, do a big water change, and siphon out any of the macroalgae which aren't acclimating properly. I'm trying my hand at growing again, an algae I've had a lot of trouble with in the past, which is Caulerpa racemosa, or the grape algae. what I tend to find with it, it tends to actually turn white and puff out its spores and then just disintegrate and just die. So far, some of that happened, which probably is attributed to this algal bloom on the glass. But I've also got sections here which are actually taken hold and growing quite readily. They've got some new fronds starting to grow and some new rhizomes. So I think a bit of a cleanup's needed, and then water change, and then take stock and see what's actually going on in that tank. But from what I can see here and what I show you, it's actually doing quite well. This tank here is my brand new tank I built just recently. It's 80 centimeters long, 60 centimeters front to back, and 45 centimeters high, and which is about 2.5 foot by 2 foot by 1.5 foot. I've built it as like an all-in-one style aquarium, and I'm going to replicate it on this side. It's going to be for a new project I've got with dedicated to keeping sand sifting gobies. I'm really interested in developing some deep substrates, some real diversity in the substrate layer, and just set them up with some what's considered to be impossible to keep species, and just see how I go with that. I can get access to collecting lots of microfauna from underneath the rocks in the estuaries, the mangroves near my house. I'll get the substrates really matured quite nicely before I add the fish, and ideally, who knows, one day I might be able to breed those species. I just think we often try and jam all the fishes into our mixed coral tank, and we're not really providing the conditions that we need specifically for those fishes. They then pass away because they're malnourished. We think that they're impossible to keep, but all it is because we didn't set them up the way they need to be kept. So that's what I'm going to be doing up here. So thanks guys for coming by and having a look at my fish shed. I really enjoy spending time here, and I'm very, very lucky to have so much space. Speaking of space, you can see this lovely area right here, backed up by a nice big sump. As I mentioned previously, my one fish in my estuary tank over there, Monster, my spotted moray eel, he needs to have a different home. He needs to have a home which is a coral reef style aquarium, a warm water aquarium, and something with a fair bit of size to it, because he's already a large eel. He's sitting at about probably 3 foot, but he can grow to be around about probably 5 foot and about that fat. So what I'm planning to do with this space here and tie into my existing sump is build it's going to be a large aquarium. I'm not settled on the dimensions yet. It could be 6 foot by 6 foot and 4 foot high, or quick, look. There he is there. Sorry about that, guys. Let me get that set up again. That was just really exciting. I love seeing Monster. So Monster needs his own space. He needs a large tank. He needs a very large tank. He needs a coral tank. He needs warm water. So that's what I'm going to give him. A lot of the coral that's in this tank here, I'll probably move across into the new tank. A lot of the fish, I'll move across into the new tank. Funnily enough, I found with Monster, he's the most gentle moray eel I've ever known. He's the biggest I've got. He's about 3 foot long, but he does not eat fish. He loves his octopus, he loves his squid. He will occasionally take a pilchard, but I've never ever had him eat a fish. He's very safe with the fish, unlike the green moray. So I will move a lot of the fish from this tank into the new tank. Some of the fish which are found in my local break wall style environment, I will move across into my estuary tank. So that would be ones like my convict tangs, my moon wrasse, and possibly the 3-spot wrasse. And that will leave this tank empty. Thanks for stopping by. Feel free to check out the videos that I've got linked, and learn a bit more about how to build your own plywood and epoxy aquariums. And see you next time.